Okay, so welcome to the next session, which is the Conservative Therapies Part 2. Hopefully Jen will be with us in a second to help me moderate this. We've also got 3 presentations for this session, and so we were going to take questions at the end of each presentation. Hopefully we should have a bit more time to do that. So without further ado, I want to start with the first presentation, who is Wendy Oide Nwajami de Halse, I'm sure she'll say that better herself, about the use of patient-reported data in machine learning to predict pain rehabilitation. Is this possible or not?
Welcome, and thank you for being here. I'm happy to get the opportunity to present this abstract at the BritSpine 2021. I'm sorry that I'm not able to join this session myself, but my colleague Stephanie Jansen-Kostering is here to answer your questions as much as possible. Stephanie, thank you for being in this session. Before I start, I will give a short overview about my background. I'm a computer and data scientist and researcher, and at the time I wrote this abstract, I worked 1 day a week for the Roosink Research and Development. The RRD is partner in the European Backup Project, which is a project on prognostic model to support more effective and efficient management of neck and low back pain. In this presentation, I present some results of the master assignment of Duncan Jansen, one of the co-authors of this abstract, and will briefly address the topics as shown in this slide. The focus of this pilot study was on patients with neck and low back pain. For non-specific neck and low back pain, it is difficult to select an appropriate treatment. In the Netherlands, very complex cases can be directed to multidisciplinary biosocial rehabilitation, or in short, MBR. It appears that about 30% of the referrals to MBR is not appropriate, and this is resulting in that patients are sent back to the referee, which are in most cases the general practitioner. To work towards a more efficient care path, it would be useful to develop a decision support system for healthcare professionals to support the decision process in selecting an appropriate referral. In this study, the research question was, is it possible to use patient-reported intake data only to predict for MBR admission with the help of machine learning? The data used for this study were patient-reported data collected by the Pain Rehabilitation Department of the Roosink Center for Rehabilitation. The data was collected from September 2012 to July 2019 with questionnaires. From 52 patients, it was known whether they were admitted to MBR or not. And this was manually processed by Anneke Beckman, one of the co-authors of this abstract and psychodiagnostic worker in the Roosink. The data set was a little bit imbalanced, but not extreme. The imbalanced ratio accepted-rejected was 1.4 by 1. For modeling, we used neural network and boosted trees algorithms and 5-fold cross-validation. 80% of the data was used as training set and 20% as test set. And the area under the curve was used as performance measure. Unfortunately, the results show small learning effects. And in conclusion, we can say that patient-reported intake data is not enough for predicting whether a patient should be admitted to MBR or not. Therefore, more information is needed to develop more accurate machine learning prediction models. For example, information collected during the intake moment with a healthcare professional, or data sources, for example, patient health records. This was the presentation. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, please ask Stephanie or send me an email.
thank you. An exciting insight there into the emerging methods of using data and possibilities this opens for future research. I don't think any questions have come in specifically for Stephanie, who's kindly stepping in to answer questions at this point. So I don't know if you agree, Michelle, whether we move on to the next talk. Okay, so our second talk is titled State Anxiety Improves Prediction of Pain and Pain-Related Disability over 12 weeks in Patients with Acute Low Back Pain, a cohort study, and it's presented by Hank Hallegraaf.
Dear colleagues, my name is Hank Hallegraaf. I'm a researcher and lecturer in the field of non-specific low back pain patients. And I will tell you in a short pitch about our recently published study in Journal of Physiotherapy reflecting the role of state anxiety in the transition from acute low back pain to chronic low back pain. Anxiety is the anticipation of a future threat, which leads to nervous behavior, concentration problems, inner agitation, and somatic symptoms such as worry, restlessness, and muscular tension. A part of anxiety is state anxiety, which is a temporary subjective condition that reflects feeling of fear and tension due to physical or perceived threats. We conducted a univariable and multivariable logistic regression analysis, and the latest one to adjust for independent association with established factors: pain intensity, pain-related disability, pain duration, physical workload, and widespread pain. For these 5 prognostic factors, there is evidence in their role from acute low back pain to chronic low back pain. The results of our study indicated that state anxiety is an independent predictor of chronic low back pain, defined as pain and pain-related disability at 12 weeks, in contrast to trait anxiety. Well, I will show you in this table with the outcome of pain that the role of state anxiety, as well as in the unadjusted analysis as in the adjusted logistic analysis, state anxiety showed an odds ratio of 1.1 with a small interval and both significant. In the adjusted model, pain, pain-related disability, duration, physical workload, and widespread pain are added, and the odds ratio of state anxiety still remains 1.1. After that, we conducted an area under the curve analysis. The blue line represents the 5 established factors. The red line indicates the additional role of state anxiety in the model. Here you can see that the area under the curve increased by adding state anxiety in the prognostic model. The conclusion of our study is that patients with acute low back pain presenting in primary care with higher levels of state anxiety do have higher risk to develop chronic low back pain and pain-related disability at 12 weeks. Physiotherapists and GPs should identify those patients in the acute stage in order to intervene and decrease the risk of chronicity. I would like to thank you for your attention. If you have any questions to ask, please feel free to do so. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Hank. I still don't think we've got questions from it, so pop your questions in and we'll put them to the presenters at the end. So our final presentation today is by Carl Barracks, who's talking about a patient journey following lumbar discectomy surgery, a qualitative analysis of the patient rehab experience using patient diaries.
Hi, my name is Carl Barracks. I'm the lead author for our study titled A Patient Journey Following Lumbar Discectomy Surgery, a qualitative analysis of the patient rehabilitation experience using patient diaries. Back pain is a significant problem worldwide. Sciatic pain is a subset of this. There is evidence to support lumbar discectomy surgery where lumbar radiculopathy is not improving. Most report improvement with surgery. However, 20 to 25% of patients are not fully satisfied with their outcome. Anything we as clinicians can do to improve this pathway for this patient group is obviously beneficial. We undertook this qualitative study to understand the discectomy pathway experience from the patient's perspective. We used an interpretive phenomenological analysis within a phenomenology framework to enable explanation of the patient's experience of the lumbar discectomy journey. It was a single-centre study using purposeful sampling, using patient diaries for data collection. Thematic analysis was used to analyse the data. Trustworthiness measures were used throughout the process, and 4 main themes emerged from the data. The first theme was weighting, which describes the participant experience in their first 6 weeks post-discharge from surgery. The second theme describes interaction between the healthcare professional and the patient. The third theme describes the patient's progress and recovery. And the fourth theme describes the effect of the emotional journey patients experience throughout. Weighting theme had 4 sub-themes. Guidance, where the patient's experience was that they felt they had a lack of guidance on what to expect and what to do post-surgery. Isolation, where patients were removed from normal life. Understanding, where patients did not feel they knew what they could or could not do. And expectation, where patients' expectations were often not met during this waiting phase. In the patient and healthcare communication theme, there is strong influence of the healthcare team. Advice given modified beliefs and therefore behaviours. There were examples of positive influences which helped reassure patients and help patients make sense of recovery. However, there were repeated examples of restricted advice and language which was not always grounded in the evidence and seemed to be based on the health professional's beliefs rather than relating to the evidence-based approach to patient care. This led to the sub-themes of avoidance and vigilance experienced by the patient. Progress and recovery theme, participants base their recovery on the ability to return to work and valued activities. Participants associated meaningful recovery to functional improvement, which led to an increase in confidence. But where valued activities were not attained, this reduced participant motivation. Similar findings have been found in this study by Rushton et al. The sub-theme acceptance alludes to the fact that at this point in recovery, if a patient had ongoing symptoms, there was an acceptance that this may not change. Patient journey was a bit of an emotional roller coaster, with different emotions described throughout the post-op recovery. It is the effect these emotions had on recovery that was most interesting. When participants felt positive emotions, this increased motivation, as well as activity and independence, and seemed to accelerate recovery. The opposite happened in response to negative emotions, where participants seemed to have a handbrake on recovery, self-management reduced, and there was a more pessimistic outlook of future recovery. Previous research has found similar, where participants felt their life was on hold and they had an uncertain future. Conclusion and clinical implications. Timeframes between discharge and initial contact with the health professional should be considered. Long initial waits that fit a biomedical framework would appear to have negative consequences when considered in a biopsychosocial framework. Health professionals have a powerful influence over the patient's journey. Communication and language between the health professional and the patient seems to be at the heart of this interaction, and there are indications that clinicians are contributing to iatrogenic outcomes and fear-avoidant behaviour in patients. Progress and recovery were linked to individualised valued activities. Therefore, this should be considered in rehabilitation to provide an individual approach. Positive emotions were linked to increase in activity and motivation. Negative emotions slowed recovery and led to a pessimistic output. Clinicians need to understand how their patients are feeling and support them in a biopsychosocial framework to optimise recovery. Here are the references and any questions.
Thank you. So that concludes our 3 presentations, and we have had some questions come in. So if I start off with the first one, I think this one is for Hank, and it's a question from Siobhan Steins saying, I might have missed it, but how did you measure state anxiety?
State anxiety has been measured by the STI state questionnaire. It's a 20-item questionnaire. It's close similar to the trait anxiety questionnaire, which also consists of 20 questionnaires. Some items are reversed, but however, the higher the score, the more anxious the person will be.
Okay, thank you. Michelle?
Thanks very much, Hank. So we've got a question in for Stephanie on behalf of Wendy. Can you talk further about the next step for your project, developing artificial intelligence if required for the future?
Yes, I will try. Wendy has several upcoming projects where we try to find out whether or not these ideas really work. So they have an assumption now, and together with the rehabilitation centers at the Netherlands and a few other people are interested in trying in other projects to see if this really works and to put patients in the right spot or in the right treatment spot as soon as possible. But of course, it's still a bit of future. There's still a lot of things that needs to be solved and still a lot of things that needs to be sure that it works properly. And that is something, Wendy is not only focusing on back pain, but this idea of using this kind of machine learning technologies, she also puts in studies with COPD, for example.
Okay, I've got, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I cannot elaborate more on this because it's not my expertise, but please contact Wendy when you want to know, because she's the one you need to have.
Okay, I've got a next question from Louise White, asking a question to Carl. What do you think were the limitations of this study?
I guess the first thing that comes to mind is we had 14 participants, so it's quite a small sample size. And they were all from one centre, so that might give us a little bit of a biased sample. In response to that, I haven't got the exact data, but we did have a reasonable heterogeneity within the sample size between males and females and ethnic background. So that was a strength. Also, we used diaries, so there were some issues with some members, some participants completing the diaries, and they didn't complete the full 12 months worth of diaries. So our analysis in the study that I presented here is for the first 3 months, and we thought this would be beneficial because it fits within reasonable healing times. So that's probably where the limitations are.
Thanks, Carl. I think they're all coming in for you now. So the next one for you, Carl, is looking at essentially, Jim's asking if we need to perhaps revisit our postdoc recommendations, referring everyone to rehab services following discectomy. I guess that's against Peter Goodwin's paper, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think the evidence to guide, I agree. But I think we probably need to also go back and look at the literature with regards to this a bit around the evidence that actually help guide clinicians give the correct evidence. One thing that came through really clearly in the study was this sense of certain recommendations which created avoidance and vigilance behaviour in the participants. And I think that's probably not helped a great deal in the strength of the evidence that we've got on what those post-op restrictions should be and how long they should last for, which meant that in this study, participants tended to resort back into what they believed based on their own beliefs, really. So I think we need some more literature to help guide that. Would be my answer.
Okay. Thank you for that. Again, I've got another one here for Carl. You mentioned post-op advice and language being inconsistent. Where do you think we go from here, and how do you think we can address this? And that's from Damien Kimber.
Sorry, I didn't catch that a little bit. Was that for me? Hello?
Can you hear me now?
I think Carl's cut off, Jen. So
okay.
What I'll do is I'll put Nadine's question to Stephanie on behalf of Wendy, if that's okay.
Yep.
Nadine has said patient-reported data alone didn't lead to a ML model that can predict sufficiently. Would you plan to redo the model, combining data from the clinical assessments? And if no, need clinical assessment data, what do you see as the use for ML instead of clinical decision making?
Yeah, I already mentioned that I would forward this question to Wendy, but I give a small response on it. It's true. Maybe more data is needed to get the correct modules. So Wendy will find out what extra needed can be added to have a good module. The second part of the question I not really understand, because MI is something that could help you to do clinical decision making. So I don't see them as two different things, but two things that are helping each other. But maybe we could elaborate this in a more smaller group.
Perfect. I think it's probably worth us putting Nadine in touch with Wendy, then, isn't it? I guess on that. I think Carl's cut off, and there's the questions that are coming in are for him. So it might be a fitting time to tie up the session. What do you think? Do you agree, Jen?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
I think just want to say there's a couple of questions on communication that have come in. And there is a session, Matt Lowe is doing a session for us on communication skills, I think on Friday morning. So that's a National Back Pain Clinical Network session that it may be people who are talking about advice and inconsistent language. I don't know if you've heard Matt talk before, but he's fantastic talking about those kind of things. Please do join us for that session on Friday. But thank you everyone for joining us on this session. It's lunchtime now, so time for everyone to have a break, and the speakers will be in the networking lounge if people want to chat. So please do join everyone, and you can have a chat there, and we'll catch up with you this afternoon.
Thank you.